I gave you permission to record. Okay,
There
so
you go.
today we'll be hearing from our friends at Geosyntec, and I'm going to stop sharing, Dave, and I'll let you all introduce yourself and
Cool.
dive in.
All right. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about geothermal, and I'll describe that in a little more detail, what we mean by that. Also, thank you to Luke for organizing. He and I both received our master's in geology from Northern Arizona University in geology, and we both sit on a committee for the School of Earth and Sustainability. So it's been really fun to get reconnected to Luke, and so with me, I've got a couple colleagues. So my colleague Sri Tangarala is on. He's located down in our Southern California office and has experience in thermal modeling and evaluation. And then I also, at the last minute, I saw her on here, but Isabella Von Trapp is on. She's a hydrogeologist that does a lot of the ground source heating and cooling design work with me. So what I'm going to do today is just give kind of an overview talk over the next 20 or so minutes, focused primarily on ground source heating and cooling, and explain a little bit about what we've been doing at Geosyntec. Now, I may slip up, you guys, because I was one of 5 owners of a company called Aspect Consulting based here in Seattle, 130-person geologic, hydrogeologic environmental firm. So we just sold to Geosyntec a year ago, which has been exciting, and it's given me and us a bigger platform to play on, not only across the US, but across our offices internationally. So a lot of exciting things happening in this marketplace, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about that today. So without further ado, I'm going to share a screen. Oh, and the other thing, I just gave this talk last week for the Clean Tech Alliance, which is a Washington state-based nonprofit organization, and I sit on the Untapped Thermal Energy Working Group. So I was asked to give a talk very similar to what Luke and I had envisioned for today. So sharing my screen. Okay, so let me kind of did the intro. So let me skip down here, you guys. Here's the big thing on how I always start these talks these days. I mean, what is geothermal? And really, it's broken down into, I define it in two parts. One is energy production, and the other is using ambient temperatures in the earth for heating and cooling. And so one of the ways that we're thinking about it within Geosyntec is focused on this box here. So, and this is where we're playing pretty heavily right now, is in this upper northwest quadrant, which is the ground source heat pump technology. As you move further to the right on this axis, temperature increases, and there are experts working in geologic thermal energy storage. And then as you work your way down, this is depth. You've got direct use of thermal energy. Where we're seeing most of this happening is in old oil and gas wells, where you already have infrastructure in the ground, and you might be able to pull out some heat with that infrastructure that's already there. And then in this quadrant, this is typically deeper depths, higher temperatures, or if you've heard the term super hot rocks, this is creating fractures in super hot rock, 300 degrees C plus type energy production. It's kind of the holy grail of tapping our Earth's energy for power generation. I think there are a lot of people and a lot of venture capital type money going into this right now, but it's still a ways out. Just fun. I think there are a lot of geologists on the call, so typically I'm the only geologist in the room. And so this talk last week, I figured, well, we'll start with plate tectonics. So I described the western US subduction zone and the melting of oceanic crust to create the big volcanoes in Washington, Oregon, Northern California, some hot spots like Yellowstone, just to demonstrate to the audience that geology matters, and there are mechanisms to create heat within the Earth through plate tectonics. And then I start to transition into what this means. So there are, no surprise to all of us, there are locations in the Western states where we can tap or trying to tap geothermal energy for power production. These are the red locations in our Western states. And then over here, this is an interesting graphic if you haven't seen it. That energy production is on the right side of this cross section where you're into deep EGS energy production, where you're fracturing rock and pulling that heat out of the ground, creating steam and spinning turbines. What I'm going to focus the rest of the talk on today is over here on the left, which is ground source heat pump. So this is tapping the Earth in the 305 to 500 foot range, or in aquifers that may extend down 500 to 200 to 1,000 feet deep. So much shallower than what's going on with energy production. Okay, I'll keep going. So now we're going to transition over to our expertise right now, and this is happening now. We have plenty of opportunities with ground source heating and cooling, and where geologists and Earth expertise comes in play right now is on the bigger scale, district energy, complicated heating and cooling design and systems thinking. It's not putting in a borehole and a U-bend pipe at a residence. That's not what we're doing as consultants. I'm excited to say that that's happening quite a bit across the country, but for consulting practitioners, they don't really need us to do that. What they need geologists, hydrogeologists for, and thermal experts is in this graphical simulation. So there are two types of ground source systems. One is called a closed loop system, where you're drilling 300 to 500 foot deep boreholes, grouting them with a thermally enhanced grout, which for us geologists means that there's just more quartz sand in that grout mix than typical, because it's more thermally conductive. And then running to heat a building, you'd run very cold fluids down through that 1-inch diameter HDPE U-bend loop. And second law of thermodynamics, we're trying to attract heat from the ground, soil or rock, into that fluid, and then we'll bring that fluid back up at a greater temperature. So if we put fluid down at 32 degrees in the U-bend pipe, it'll come back at 37 degrees. And we use that 5-degree benefit in a heat pump, which compresses that 5-degree benefit and pushes heat out into the building. The system runs just in 180 degrees from that. You collect all the heat in the building, run it through a heat pump, push it back down in the ground at 70, 80 degrees, and it dissipates back out into the formation. Where these systems are most economically viable and super efficient is where mechanical engineers at the surface are looking at moving heating and cooling capacity across two different types of buildings. You can imagine if one building is in heating mode and another is in cooling mode and it's perfectly balanced, you don't need the ground. You can do all that work mechanically. That's usually not the case. That's usually out of balance. And so we're tapping the ground to supply that difference, either as a base load or for certain peaking events for heating and cooling. So that's how ground source typically works with heat pumps. That's the closed loop system. It can be limited because you need a lot of land at these high heating and cooling load facilities. Here's what we're focused on. We design both types of systems, but here's where we're finding a lot of advantages is if there are aquifers present, then we'll remove groundwater through an extraction well, run it through the heat pump, heat or cool buildings, and then push that water back down into that same aquifer. It's a closed system, although we call it open loop, there's no net loss of groundwater. Much more efficient than a closed loop system and can be scaled over time. So some facts, ground source systems can be installed anywhere. When I started talking about ground source heating and cooling about 15 years ago, the conventional wisdom and the rule of thumb is that it would never work in the Pacific Northwest. It was too temperate. It just wouldn't work, or wouldn't pencil is the term that I always heard. Well, that was just crazy talk then, and I think we've gotten over that hump. These systems can be put anywhere. You just need to have some systems thinking with mechanical engineers about how to do it. It's pretty low risk. These are known technologies. It's not like we're creating anything new. Ground source heating and cooling and heat pumps have been around for 100 years. The permitting can be pretty straightforward, particularly for a closed loop system. Open loop does take some permitting expertise. I'll talk about that in a minute. I did talk about open loop being able to be optimized at scale, and it really requires a geologist, hydrogeologist to be involved and engaged in that design process. And that's a little scary because there's been a lot written about ground source heating and cooling from the mechanical engineering side, and they believe that you can just call a driller, drill some holes and design this system. Bad planning, if you ask me. You need to have our expertise in the game. They're very efficient, as I said, and where I think this marketplace is going is going to head toward district energy or heating and cooling systems.
Dave, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What kind of planning does Geosyntec do? Do y'all do like feasibility groundwater modeling?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll show a couple case studies of what we've done, but yeah, we get in early and at the feasibility stage. Hey, is it even feasible? We start with yes, and then we start to back out of what that means. Is there an aquifer there at this site? Yes or no? And if no, or it's too deep, then we may think about closed loop, and there are off ramps, go, no go decisions. I have a slide on that coming up here. Let me show
Okay,
that.
great. Thanks. I can be patient.
No, it's great. That's great. Feel free to interrupt. And I've already talked a little bit about this. I'm a big advocate for geology. I know Luke is. It's something we've been talking about at NAU is why don't people completely understand who geologists are and what we do? So I'm trying to talk more about our skill set and the need to handle earth-related problems and solutions going into the future. I'm pretty nervous that there's not
Mhm.
enough of
Are you,
us
quick
in
other question.
the future.
Are you guys mapping the aquifers, or you just take them as a given homogeneous unit?
Can you say that again?
Are you guys mapping the aquifers and geophysically, or you assume them as homogeneous and all over the place?
Oh, well, yes and yes. So we have, at Geosyntec, we have geologic expertise across the entire country. So we'll have experts that know things about aquifers regionally, locally. So we kind of start there. We're not creating a master map, if that's the question. But we're using our local knowledge to start kind of in the feasibility stages.
Yeah, usually aquifers are confined. They have a flow direction and they have a volume, a K factor. So my question is, are you guys taking this into your modeling and in your planning or not?
Yeah, yeah, we're doing, if wells exist on a site, we'll go out and do a pump test and hydraulic modeling. At the same time, we're collaborating with mechanical engineers. Actually, let me answer it this way. So this is what I was getting to related. I'll answer both of your questions with our timeline. So this is what we do. So, and this is the process that we found to be successful, is there's a feasibility stage. Can ground source work, closed or open loop? And we do an initial desktop study. We'll use whatever information and expertise we've got in-house or available online. And we'll be talking with our clients, and we may say, hey, this is a no-go. No, we know you want to do an open loop groundwater supply system. There's no groundwater. It's not there. Go look at a different technique. We'll look at permitting. Regulations are different in every state. They're nuanced. So that could be a go, no-go decision. If we get marginally through goes on both of those desktop stages, then we'll go out and we'll drill a borehole for a closed loop thermal conductivity test and put in a U-bend piping, or we'll drill a groundwater well and do a pump test and do all the hydraulic calculations related to the capacity of that aquifer. A lot of times when we're at that stage, we're also communicating with mechanical engineers, so they know what some of the big heating and cooling design loads are, and they will feed us thermal loads, so that we can also do a thermal model on top of our hydraulic model. So that's all in kind of in that feasibility stage. If we progress beyond that, then we get into design, step 2. And then we're trying to optimize design. We're going back and forth with the mechanical engineers about, they're thinking about, can we move heating and cooling energy around a building based on the uses within that building or across buildings? And then they'll come back to us and say, hey, our heating load went from 100 tons to 50 because we figured out a way to use heat in another way. So there's usually a couple iterations of that design, and we found that to be really, really helpful to really optimize these systems. And then we go to construction, and particularly if it's a open loop groundwater well system, you need a hydrogeologist to design the well screen. We're there for risk management, design purposes, construction oversight. So does that answer both of your questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, so now a couple things. I talked a little bit about this. So a lot of our systems, because of the work that we've done now over about a decade at Aspect, I'm going to focus a few of these on Washington State. So for us, we're in the Western states. We comply with Western water law, so there are water rights that we will evaluate. There are some non-consumptive closed basins to consider, and those basins would have concerns about anyone tapping water within that watershed. Again, we'd come back and say that this is no, this is not a consumptive use. And then the next question would be, well, are you heating up our aquifer? And so that's why that thermal modeling is critical. Not only to demonstrate that we aren't affecting an aquifer over time, but that we aren't creating a heat plume that migrates into a river or off a property. For us in Pacific Northwest, we also have listed waters 303D because of salmon habitat, salmon migration. So again, thermal modeling critical to make sure that we're not affecting negatively migratory waters. So this example, this color graphic at the bottom here represents a thermal model that Isabella actually did in Seattle, adjacent to Lake Union, which is the body of water that you see right between downtown Seattle and the Space Needle. And a client wanted to build a closed loop system right adjacent to Lake Union. And each one of these dots represents a closed loop borehole. You can see that groundwater flows into the lake, and then we've got some modeling here that shows that there is the possibility of based on the cooling loads of this building of affecting Lake Union. This project actually did not go forward. We recommended that the developer who was developing 2 buildings just do their ground source system on one building 1 block further away from the lake, and then they would have been okay to design there, but elected not to do that. We also have underground injection control registration requirements. I'm guessing you do in New Mexico and the Southwest as well. But this is just the format that we follow in Washington State. Pretty common. A couple case studies. This is something that we're pretty excited about, and this is, I believe, the future of our consulting practice is to talk with clients about transitioning from carbon-based fuels for heating and transitioning from evaporative cooling systems to something that's more environmentally friendly, which ground source now is in the conversation all the time. So one of our clients, Central Washington University, is looking to decarbonize. They've got goals and a plan to do that and move off their conventional boilers. And they've asked us to study their campus. So on the right is their entire campus, and we're working with a partner mechanical firm called Kinstry. And they've got these circles around campus of where they would, where the campus is interested in converting either a building, a portion of campus, or the entire campus to a ground source system. The good news for Central Washington and Ellensburg, Washington, which is just over the east of the Cascade Mountains, is they're sitting on a big aquifer that's relatively shallow. It's a couple hundred feet deep, so very easy to drill into, high capacity. And we've been modeling, this is just one model here on the left, and with our thermal model here in the center of a feasibility and a cost estimate to convert one building, a section of campus, or the entire campus. So this represents extraction wells in red and injection wells in blue. across the entire campus. And we've done some calculations to demonstrate that this would be feasible, and they could do this open loop type system over time. That's the cool thing about open loop, is you can scale it, and you're just putting in wells rather than in a closed loop system. They'd have to dedicate entire blocks or football or sports fields for a closed loop bore field. Here's a project that's completed at Washington State Public Health Lab. This also was an open loop system, and on the in the center here is just the representation of extraction well and the radius of influence of pumping, and then the reinjection well. And on the right is the system that we designed for them. So EW is an extraction well. Here's the health lab facility here. And then we've got two injection wells. The interesting thing about, and this is running, it's very efficient. The lab's been able to transition off carbon-based fuels. The lab was also looking at building a new building over here, and another design team came in and wanted to do a closed loop system. So we said, hey, time out, you know, let's get together and compare our thermal models, or let us do a thermal model of what you're planning over here, so that we don't intersect the open loop system that we've got running over here. They've put this project on hold, so we haven't had to worry about that yet, but something that we are thinking about as we go. One other thing that we've been leading, which is pretty cool, is I've got a site in West Virginia. We have a project in West Virginia with a client that owns thousands of acres of land. That land is being mined by both mountaintop removal, surface coal mining, and underground coal mining. And what we've been asked to do is, part of the underground coal mine is now mined out. Close is about 1,000 feet below the ground surface, and it's represented by this black line in this middle photograph. And after they've shut off the dewatering pumps, the bottom part of this underground mine is filled up with water. So there's a 1 billion gallon mine pool in this mine. And these are some cross sections that span across the underground mine and the mine pool. And then we've got it represented here. The flooded part of the underground mine is shown in blue, and it's not just flat. This isn't Grand Canyon geology, so it's somewhat of a complex three-dimensional problem. But the water's there, and the idea is to pump water out of the mine pool, build a facility. Right now, the client's looking at a data center, build a facility at the surface and use the mine pool water for cooling, and then put the hot, warm water back either into the same open space of the abandoned mine, or there are other mine seams here. So we're also thinking about, what if we put it back in a different coal seam that's now mined out, and let it infiltrate back down to the lowest elevation. So just some cool mix of geology and ground source, and something that's affecting the country big time, which is powering and cooling these data centers, which are everywhere. Right now, data centers use evaporative cooling and just tons and tons of water to cool those facilities. There are some financial incentives and grants for both geothermal energy and ground source, which are coming through the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. So there's some tax credits and grants. There are also some special programs for residential credits and also commercial. And each state, I think, is developing some of their own incentives. We've got some in Washington State, which I've listed here. There's a new one in Washington that hasn't been tapped yet related to geothermal energy, which I've got one more slide here. This is the bill that was 6039 that was just passed that I thought you guys might be interested in. Maybe I'll stop there. I've got, well, just for Luke's and my benefit, I've got a couple slides of why we're excited about ground source. Here's our alma mater, Northern Arizona University, and you know, a lot of schools, a lot of states have climate action plan goals to decarbonize. Here's one that's happening at our university, at NAU. They have a big, they're up in the nice Ponderosa pine forest and have a lot of slash and burn piles. So they're looking at a waste biofuel boiler with waste wood products. Unfortunately, they're not sitting on a big aquifer, so that's probably not going to be a ground source opportunity. Here's the other thing I've been exploring with my colleagues at Geosyntec is data centers and the holy grail of cooling. It really is a significant issue and problem, although the water for cooling element is masked right now because of the amount of power that data centers are consuming across our power grid. So the evaporative water that happens at all of these facilities has kind of been put in the background lately. So I've got a few more of these, you know, what we're excited about, but let me stop there and see if there are some questions.
I just had one that came to mind, Dave. I'll just dive in. It's so do you see like I guess, is there a net power electricity use reduction when you go to these I just feel like you're pumping a lot of water around and moving. And so, and I guess, you know, like maybe you're using less carbon fuels, you're not burning natural gas, but like you're still using a lot of electricity, which maybe come from a coal-fired power plant. So like, have you guys done those numbers to see if you actually are net like less energy use overall? Like if you looked at the whole project?
Yeah, it's a great question. We haven't done that, but our partner McKinstry has done that, and I hear from them all the time that these are, you know, this pumping power is way less than
Yeah.
powering other traditional heating and cooling systems.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, that's part of the whole, you know, efficiency return on investment equation.
Right.
That you're not using a ton of power. I don't know, maybe I'll put Shri or Isabella on the spot. Either one of you, can either one of you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi everyone. So, you know, from my knowledge, even the kind of projects, we haven't worked on those numbers, but there are these engineering firms which deal with these things. And the kind of metric which people follow is something called levelized costs. Levelized costs of heating and then electricity. And there are some kind of firms out there which kind of have these conventional numbers, like a benchmark of how much would you expect for a usual combustion from a natural gas to produce power or heat in comparison to what you have for geothermal or solar or different projects, what you have, right? And that kind of sets the project apart from the other projects. And when I say levelized cost, what I mean is the total amount of, you know, the capital costs and operating costs per every megawatt hour of energy being produced. So you have everything factored in there, right? How much you are putting in the power and how much you are producing power. So eventually it comes down to what Dave said, the economics. So that will be the last part of the puzzle to solve for any project.
I have a question for you guys which crossed. So I'm originally from Germany, and district heating and cooling, more heating is a pretty big thing. And one company comes to mind is Avor. They are building these huge systems down there. I think they go deeper than you guys. They are drilling in the Mola space and down to the Jurassic. It's about 3,500 to 3,000 meters. But what I was more interested is basically in your heating and cooling. Uh, are you targeting preferentially confined aquifers or unconfined aquifers? So, because that's a little bit an issue, I think, in terms of, you're tapping into if you do confined, you're tapping into a confined system, which comes with a lot of concerns, and I guess also with a lot of regulatory requirements. If you have a comment on that, would be interesting.
Yeah, Isabella, are you able to jump on?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So most of my experience has been in Washington State or just generally in the Pacific Northwest, where we primarily are targeting confined aquifers. In our experience, and this might just be because of the regulatory framework in Washington, it's actually easier to permit a confined system because usually you're not in direct hydraulic continuity with like a surface water, like Dave mentioned at the beginning, that are regulated for temperatures and TMDLs sometimes. We have done unconfined systems, like we did a project in Spokane a couple years ago that was just right on which is the eastern part of the state, right on the edge of the Spokane River, in these really highly transmissive flood gravels that are just like directly influenced by the river inputs. That one was interesting though, because the aquifer was so transmissive, there was no speakable or discernible pressure buildup in the injection wells. Even when we were injecting 2,000 gallons a minute back into the ground, the aquifer just took it. And that was kind of a fun one for us as hydrogeologists. But yeah, I guess in short, we have experience with both confined and unconfined aquifers. I think it just really depends on site-specific hydrogeologic characteristics and where you can find the water and how you can make it work and permit it.
Do you have any issues with contamination, background contamination in these systems, or is that not an issue? I mean, I know that from Germany and Europe, there's always a problem with the aquifer.
Yeah, generally not too much. That is something that we'll look into during the feasibility evaluation, is to understand whether there's any existing environmental kind of contamination or remediation efforts, even if not on the site, adjacent to the site, that might have an impact. And that one I mentioned in Spokane actually was interesting. It was right next door to a parcel that had some historical contamination. But in that case, luckily, because of that historical contamination, there were a lot of monitoring wells on site. So we took a bunch of chemistry samples and showed that the groundwater was moving in the opposite direction, and we didn't actually have an issue there. But it's something that we're always looking out for. And even when we are constructing an open loop system without any environmental contamination, we'll just take groundwater quality samples, just because some groundwater is corrosive or might have scaling potential. So even if it's not like an environmental input, we try to tailor our designs just to the natural groundwater chemistry.
Yeah. Okay. That was my follow-up question on the water chemistry and scaling issues and things like that. Yeah. That's
Yeah. Something that we're always thinking about and trying to improve. I'm working on a project right now where the iron and the manganese is a little bit higher than we'd like it to be. So we're working with the engineers to try to pressurize the system as much as we can and make sure that we're not introducing oxygen into the system and having issues that way.
Thank you.
I will say that I've been practicing for over 30 years as a environmental and geologic consultant, and my career has started and related to brownfields, so contaminant fate and transport, and so we're very aware of the potential of moving contaminant plumes around in an aquifer. It's another reason why it's important to have experts like us involved with these larger systems where you're creating a cone of depression, and it's important to factor in contaminant plumes and pulling that into your well, which you would never want to have happen. So, you know, and this also leads us in that feasibility stage to make certain decisions. On that Spokane project that Isabella mentioned, there are two systems there, both a closed loop system and an open loop system. And the closed loop system was put in on the property that actually is a source contaminant property.
Mhm.
One of the reasons is we didn't want to move groundwater around. What Isabella's talking about is we went open loop on a property that was further away from where that contaminant source is. So we can make decisions early on in that feasibility stage related to various factors.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. We've got a question. John's been patiently holding his hand up.
I presently live in the university area of Albuquerque, and I bought a property when I was working for New Mexico Tech on their groundwater studies in the 90s next to the Indian Health Service facility it's right next to, it's the north edge of the campus and right east of the university hospital. And I worked for about 10 years on projects for the Indian Health Service, and they have I think quite a functional classic kind of example of your ground source heat pump closed loop facility here on the UNM campus. And there's a parking lot that is a large parking lot now, but you don't see the underground things, but there are about 20 or 30 closed loop holes that are about 100 meters, 300 feet deep. They're loop holes. They drill down to the water table, and which is about 100 meters, 300 feet below the surface here. And they take very high quality city water and they just pump it down in the closed loop system. It goes down, picks up heat, and then comes back up in the closed loop system. And I think it's still very effective. And it's places where you have a source of good quality water, maybe like a large municipal water system, which is treated, everything. It has probably a total dissolved solids of maybe a couple hundred to less than 300 milligrams per liter. So there's no silica or any kind of clogging, scaling problem. And that's what you need in a closed loop system to have it last for a long time. But anybody that's more interested in that project, I'm an old man now. I'll be 92 soon, and but they're going to make Soylent Green out of me in a week, and so but it's a really good. Are you familiar with that, Lou?
I'm not, but I'm thinking we might have to take a field trip. That sounds like
Okay. Yeah.
We'll come to your house and then we can go
I'll
from
take
there.
my hand off.
Sounds great. Thanks,
These
John.
are great questions. Comments. Oh, Dave, can you just because I thought it was really cool, and this is obvious to everyone else probably, but when you told me a couple months ago about how they put in the closed loop system, I think that might be beneficial just to describe that, because I found that really interesting. The mechanics of actually, well, you tell the story, but and maybe I'm just simple and it was neat to me, but yeah.
No problem. Yeah, in a closed loop system, it is typically a 300 to 500 foot deep borehole. And you can imagine it's about a 12-inch diameter hole drilled with mud or air rotary drilling techniques. And I create a hole, and then that closed loop HDPE piping, inch diameter, is on a spool, and at the end there's the pipe is welded together, so you've got a U bend at the bottom of this 2-limb pipe, and then they fill it with water, and then it just rolls off the spool, and they push it down. They've got to weight it, so you got to weight it with water, and you push it down in the hole. At the same time, that's being grouted with that thermally enhanced grout. And so you have two pieces of the HDPE pipe sticking out of the hole, the down and the up. And then that's headered into a system at the surface, and then the header system goes back to the mechanical room. So that's closed loop drilling and design method. It's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
You know, one other thing that we've pilot tested, which hasn't got a ton of legs, which is the same type of closed loop system, and I'm in downtown Seattle, and we pilot tested a project for Amazon's headquarters in downtown Seattle, where they were digging an 80-foot deep parking garage in one of their blocks. And so you can imagine they had to put piles, 120-foot deep piles, all around the perimeter of that city block. And what we were testing was, could we put HDPE pipes on that pile and weave it around all the tieback pockets so that it wouldn't get damaged? And then we did a test to see if, so we successfully were able to do that. So we attached the HE down and up pipe on a steel pile, put it in the ground, grouted it. They built the parking garage, and then we were thinking, well, geez, now we've got this big open space and our thermal collection piping really close to the garage. Would there be thermal influence from the garage in our pipe? So we did some thermal modeling to evaluate whether that garage, that open space, would affect the thermodynamics of the fluid in the pipe, and we found that it did not. We also were able to determine that the footage of pipe in the ground would have heated and cooled that big office tower, no problem. However, there was a data center right next door that was producing tons of heat, and the city and Amazon created a small eco district where they piped heat energy across an alley to heat not only that one tower, but I think 3 of the Amazon buildings in downtown Seattle get free heat from that data center. So there's just a ton of innovative things. I guess, we're coming down to the end of this. There are a ton of innovative things going on in the world of heating and cooling right now, and how to move this heat energy around to either create power or to heat and cool. And it's here. I mean, it's here. I 15 years ago, when I started doing talks, it was kind of a cool idea that no one was spending money on. But now, because there are grants and tax incentives and decarbonization goals, and a more innovative mechanical engineering population, we're in the heart of it right now. So it's an exciting time to be a geologist doing this type of underground assessment and work.
Dave, I've got a question for you. You
Sure.
mentioned a few times your concern for the importance of geology and hydrology in advancing this technology.
Mhm.
And as a hydrogeologist, I couldn't agree more. But I'm curious if you've seen a lack of these expertise in some of the maybe startup companies expanding this technology. Just kind of asking for your general advice. Maybe this is a hydrogeology support group question, but just curious of why you bring that up.
Well, Emily, thanks for picking up on that. Yeah, and here's my fear is, there have been some bad designs, and all it takes is one system that doesn't work. You know, hey, my system doesn't work. Oh my God. You talk about, especially on an emerging technology, you have one of those and it's just a killer. And it doesn't have to be. And it shouldn't be. I just think it's poor design, poor thinking, a lack of understanding, and typically I've seen situations where the mechanical engineer is doing the best they can about, you know, following the guidance in a book. This is all really scripted, some of this ground source heat pump stuff. They follow all that stuff and they don't know anything about below ground. Hey, there's an aquifer there. Why is my system performing way better than I thought? Hey, there's not an aquifer. Why are my design calcs off by 20%? Hey, why is the driller not doing this right? I mean, these are all things that we as experts of the below ground world need to be engaged in. I've convinced several mechanical engineering firms that were a necessary part of risk management of their design, and design optimization. So those, well, Geosyntec and we don't design these systems in total. We're an integral part of the design and risk management process.
I wonder how they're getting through some of the permitting process, because I thought a pre-feasibility.
Not even, no,
Right.
it, number one, closed loop has almost no permitting required. Open loop, I think that is a question. How are they getting through it? I think I mean, I don't want to blame, I'm on the pedestal of saying geologists are awesome and can do a lot of stuff that people don't know. So, but you know, they do have to get through permitting. That requires a hydrogeologist to do some calculation.
Mhm.
But I think what we have the knowledge to, we're doing more than just providing a 2-page report saying, hey, someone's gonna put in a well. I mean, we are integrated into the process. I think that's important. Rather than a mechanical engineer saying, hey, I got my hydrogeologist report, and he says I can put in a well. And, you know, she said the well screen's supposed to be at X elevations, and they go out and build it that way. And, you know, things change in the field. You got to be there.
Mhm.
So that's kind of related. That's why I talk about it. I'm trying to protect an industry, an emerging industry, and I'm also trying to advocate for next generation earth scientists.
Dave, Tom McCrory here. I have 3 reasonably quick questions. First one is, I want to give a big shout out. In our audience today is Cam Norin. Cam is the Geothermal Rising Regional Interest Group Coordinator. Cam has been encouraging us for months, giving us guidance, giving us ideas and so forth. Wouldn't have been possible without Cam. So Cam, thank you so much. That's the first one. Absolutely. Second one is, I know of at least one person, and there's probably more, who are on the New Mexico rig who wanted to attend, who had work conflicts, weren't able to do that. Can we forward to them both the recording and your slideshow?
Sure.
Okay.
Of course. Yep.
And then the third one, earlier this morning, Cam's colleague, Vanessa Robertson, Vanessa's in charge of educational outreach, university outreach. She did an hour-long presentation, national presentation on the various collegiate geothermal competitions that are coming up. If I'm not mistaken, the 2024, they're in the middle of enrolling people. And one of the themes is ground source heat pumps. I'd like to forward this to my alma mater, which is UMass Amherst, which has in the southwest corner of the campus 4 towers that house 5,000 students right across the street from an enormous athletic field complex that's just open and ripe for drilling.
Sure. Go for it.
And I'll just add that New Mexico Tech has put together a team for this geothermal competition. And as I was sitting here watching this, I was thinking I should show this to the students.
Yeah, go for it. Or I'll come down there and do it myself.
You could be adjunct on a lot of faculty, Dave.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah,
They will need some mentoring, so we may be asking you.
no problem, you guys. I didn't know about the geothermal rig until last week. And so there's a group forming in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm going to become a member of that as well. So we'll be connected through those regions. And you know, I mean, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to advocate, educate, and I'm trying to, you know, continue to build a business for my consulting firm. And I'm an open book. I think it's a cool technology. It doesn't work everywhere, and it requires some systems thinking with others, which is also fun to get out of your typical science engineering consulting box and talk with mechanical engineers, owners, and, you know, users of this technique. So it's, like I said, it's fun. And happy to come to talk more about it. So appreciate Luke giving me an opportunity with the group. And yeah, let's go do more fun stuff as earth scientists and engineers.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, you guys.
And team, and we'll stay tuned. We'll hopefully have some more of these, and I really appreciate it. So everyone, take care. Have a great day.
Great
Right.
job, Luke. Great
Catch you
job,
later.
Dave.
Luke.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Luke.
everyone.
Thanks, Cam.
Thanks for the
Thank-
technical support, Emily.
Bye,
All right,
Luke.
catch you guys later. Bye bye.